Hello everyone, welcome to New Zealand and Australian Shores. My name is Fabian Maisonneuve and I am a licensed immigration advisor. It's April 2024 and Immigration New Zealand has just announced a few major changes. We understand these may be of interest or of concern to prospective migrants or current visa holders, so we're going to go through these together. To assist and talk through these changes, I would like to welcome my colleagues, Charlotte and Frederick, both senior licensed advisors in our head office in Hamilton, New Zealand. So let's unpick these recent immigration changes and see how they may impact your goals or your circumstances. So we're going to go through green list updates, some rather major changes on accredited employer work visas. And these changes for the work visas primarily do impact the skill levels requirements and English requirements. But first, Frederick will go through the recent green list updates. As a refresher, the green list is a list of roles which offer a pathway to residency, subject to securing a job offer in New Zealand and meeting certain requirements, which are usually specific to that occupation. The green list gets regular updates, and Frederick is going to go through these through the latest ones. Let me pop that screen there.
That's great. So there has been a number of roles added to the green list recently, which is fantastic. And a number of those roles are based within the engineering industry, so namely aeronautical, naval or marine, mechanical or aircraft maintenance engineers. So the requirements for those particular roles are similar to the other engineering roles already in the green list. So that may be in the form of a qualification or registration with Engineering New Zealand. Now, other roles that have been introduced include a couple within the IT industry, so a number of administrator roles, and the requirements for meeting the green list under that category would be based on pay. And apart from that, sterilization technicians have also been included, which is great. And under the work to residence pathway, which is the 2-year pathway, corrections officers have also been included in the list, which is fantastic news for those people. However, as people may be aware, Immigration New Zealand last year made announcements in terms of adding roles to the green list. However, a number of those previously announced roles will no longer be added, and namely, of interest to some of our clients would potentially be the metal fabricators, the welders, the fitter and turners, and the metal machinists. However, the pathway for those people, there are still options available. Generally, you may qualify for 2-year or 5-year accredited employer work visas and potentially have the ability to bring your partners and children along as well. And there may be alternative pathway, residence pathways available for you moving forward. In terms of diesel motor mechanics for work to residence, there have also been some updates by Immigration New Zealand. And in terms of meeting the requirements, alternatively, as opposed to holding a specific qualification, appointment as a vehicle inspected by the New Zealand Transport Agency for fitness, certificate of fitness service delivery may suffice and meet the requirements under work to residence. And then another key change was in relation to the bus and truck drivers for the transport work to residence visa. Now, those who already hold accredited employer work visas and had started to count work, and those who had applied on or before the 6th of April will still be eligible for a transport work to residence visa. However, those bus and truck drivers who applied for an accredited employer work visa on or after the 7th of April will no longer be eligible to apply under that category.
Now, amongst the rather major changes we saw over the weekend are changes on the AEWV, the Accredited Employer Work Visas. Now, these changes are quite important because they have to do with skill level requirements, which are being sort of reintroduced as a measure of assessing someone's competency, ability to do the role. But we have also seen some changes in the maximum visa durations, which you may get. And for the first time, I believe, English proficiency requirements for select roles for work visas. The need to demonstrate English proficiency has traditionally been for residence pathways only. Now this is being introduced for certain work visas. Charlotte, over to you. Can you go through the skill levels briefly and what that means?
Yeah, so Immigration New Zealand uses what's called ANSCO to classify different occupations into different skill levels. So we've got everything from level 1 through to level 5. Levels 1, 2, and 3 are typically occupations that require generally a level 4 certificate right through to a bachelor's degree or master's degree in some instances. So often that is how those roles are classified, as typically the qualification level or experience level required in order to be deemed skilled in those roles. Levels 4 and 5 are typically roles which don't often require any form of work experience or qualifications in order to be deemed skilled in those roles. So the changes that are coming in for the Accredited Employer work visa system are really targeted at those skill level 4 and 5 roles. So there's no changes to skill levels 1, 2, and 3. But for those skill level 4 and 5 roles, there are changes to visa duration. So at this stage, based on the policy that was released on Sunday, anyone who is in a skill level 4 or 5 role, you will only be able to have a maximum duration of 3 years in total in New Zealand on that visa before you're affected by a stand down period of 12 months. So you will initially be able to get a 2-year visa granted outright initially, and then in order to get that third lot of 12 months, your employer will actually have to go through the process of submitting a further job check, and you'll have to apply for a further visa to get that last 12 months out of your total of 36 months. So it is a bit of a change. It's a bit of a backtrack on what we had seen in terms of some of those skill level roles and the maximum visa duration. Prior to this change, some of those roles would have been eligible for up to 5 years before having to have a stand down period. Whether or not you have a pathway to residency doesn't actually impact your duration of your visa if you're in a skill level 4 or 5 role either. So if perhaps you are in a skill level 4 or 5 role and you are being paid 1.5 times the median wage, you would still need to be able to get that residence application in before you'd reach your total maximum of 3 years. They've also introduced minimum competency requirements for all jobs. So we're going back a little bit to some of our policy that we had pre-COVID. So under our old essential skills work visa policy, and we've now got this under accredited employer work visa policy, they are returning to demonstrating you meet those ANSCO requirements. So for example, if you are in a skill level 1 role, you will need to either prove that you have a relevant qualification, which is stipulated as per their occupation. So again, generally bachelor's or master's, or you have 5 years work experience. If we drop down to those skill level 2 roles, it's generally a national certificate or a diploma, and then those level 3 roles are typically certificate level, or 3 years work experience for those level 2 or 3 roles. So you will have to demonstrate that. In addition, the level 4 and 5 roles, regardless of the fact that ANSCO stipulates that you don't have to have any work experience or qualifications, Immigration New Zealand are requiring you to either demonstrate that you have 3 years work experience or a bachelor's degree or higher. That the bachelor's degree or higher qualification doesn't actually necessarily have to be relevant to that skill level 4 or 5 role, but you do have to demonstrate that you're skilled either through that qual or through the work experience. So it is a big change to what we've seen to date. So it is a little bit for migrants to get their head around, and employers, in terms of how do we actually prove someone's skilled for that role.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. So a lot of people would wonder, a lot of people already in New Zealand working on an accredited employer work visa would wonder, does that affect my current visa duration or my ability to apply for a 2-year extension, which came about later last year? Can you provide a bit more information on this, Frederick?
Yeah, sure. So an AEWV's holder's maximum continuous stay period in New Zealand is determined by, number one, when you first submitted your AEWV application and whether the role is paid at or above the median wage when it was granted. So, for example, those people who submitted their AEWV applications between particular dates, 21st of June 2023 and until 6th of April 2024, and those people were paid at or above the median wage, then those people will retain the ability to hold an AEWV for 5 years. So, for example, somebody who was granted a level 5 ANSCO code role, let's say a factory process worker, and they submitted their application on the 11th of July 2023, and they were paid the median wage at that time. They can still qualify for a 2-year AWV extension if they initially were granted 3 years. And given that that was granted during that period that I've mentioned, and they will be able to claim up to the total of 5 years. However, anybody who submitted their first AWV application on or before the 20th of June 2023, or on or after the 7th of April, even if they were paid at or above the median wage, then the applicant will be subject to a maximum continuous pay depending on several conditions. So, for example, if you hold a role that's ANSCO school level 4 or 5, and your employment is not on the green list, or you're not in the work to residence in the transport sector, or you're not being paid 1.5 times the median wage, then you will only qualify for up to 3 years on an AEWV. And as Charlotte mentioned before, when you initially apply, if you're applying from the 7th of April onwards, you will initially get a 2-year accredited employer work visa with the ability to extend that for another year.
Right. Thank you, Frederick. They certainly haven't made it easy to get one's head around. I think to sum it up, the duration of your visa is determined by when your initial visa application was submitted, how much you were paid, and the skill level of your occupation. It can definitely get quite confusing, making sure you tick all the boxes. So we recommend you reach out to your advisor at New Zealand Shores if you're already working with us, or email info@nzshores.com and we can look into this for you. Another thing that got introduced over the weekend, and I believe it's a first for work visas, is the need to show English proficiency in order to be granted a work visa. And there are a few criteria around this. Charlotte, can you discuss this briefly with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are right, Fabian. I think this is a first for a work visa policy. Typically, we've only actually seen English language tests required at residency level, but they are introducing them now again for level 4 and 5 occupations only. So you're probably all starting to see a trend that the bulk of these changes do affect people in those skill levels. Level 4 and 5 roles. So if you do fall into that category, you will actually need to sit an English language test. If you're opting to sit IELTS, which is one of the most common tests, you do need to obtain an overall band score of 4 or higher. So the threshold is substantially below residency, which requires an overall band score of 6.5, but effectively it's just making sure that employers aren't bringing people into the country who perhaps may shift jobs a lot but don't actually have the ability to communicate in English very well. It doesn't affect partners and dependent children though, so if you are in one of those skill level 4 or 5 roles and you are bringing your family, it is only the principal applicant or the person who has the job that has to sit that English language test. So it's definitely, if you are perhaps looking at starting your migration process to New Zealand and you think you may be in one of these skill level 4 and 5 roles, we can of course confirm that, but it's definitely worth getting that English language test booked in and sat sooner rather than later to ensure that the job offer does come through quickly, that you've already met that requirement and you've got it ready to submit. This doesn't affect anyone in skill levels 1, 2, and 3. So again, these changes just impact that skill level 4 and 5. So if you're in those higher skill levels, it's not something you need to demonstrate.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And also just a brief reminder is that English test results, if you've taken the test already, are valid for 2 years for immigration purposes. I think we're going to wrap up with a few words about the VOCs, variation of conditions, or job changes on accredited employer work visas.
Yeah, so as Charlotte mentioned earlier, there are requirements now to provide a minimum standard of English language and potentially a minimum skills threshold But for those AEWV holders seeking a job change, those requirements that have come up recently do not apply to the job change applications moving forward, which is good news. And those already holding AEWV don't have to worry about meeting those requirements if they wanted to change jobs, if they wanted to change locations or employers.
Okay. And how do the new requirements for VOCs impact the duration of your visa?
Yeah, so for example, if somebody holds a 5-year accredited employer work visa right now, they will not be able to be granted a variation of conditions or a job change to work in a role allowing a 2-year visa. So the 2-year visa again applies to those ANSCO skill level 4 and 5 roles, unless they are paid at the median wage, which is currently at $29.66, and their application for the accredited employer work visa was submitted on or before the 6th of April, and they are in an ANSCO skill level 4 to 5 occupation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Frederick. So no English requirement for job changes, which is great news. A few minor technicalities that might have an impact on the maximum visa duration for those changes. Once again, we recommend you reach out to us if you have any doubt on your current situation so we can advise on the best possible options for you. If you're already working with an advisor at NZ Shores, please contact them directly because they know your background and your immigration history. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us at info@newzealandshores.com. Thanks a lot, Frederick. Thanks, Charlotte.